Hey everyone, good evening and welcome to our hot seat session for the month of May. So these are my absolute favorite thing we do because I get to just chat with people and learn from others about certain areas that I know very little about, like today where we're going to talk about estate planning and wills and all those things that honestly I couldn't even tell you very much about them. So we brought in Dvorah today. Now before I fully introduce her and turn on her video and all that, I do want to share with you guys something that's brand new as of today in Funding Freedom U. Now, some of you have stumbled on this already. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So we have our brand new community up and running. You've heard me talking about it for quite some time. It is officially live today. So here's what it looks like. I have been really happy with this. It's been something I've been working on for quite some time. I ran into a lot of technical hiccups because I'm not a computer savvy guy, but it's up and going. So I'll be posting a tutorial video in the forum either tonight or tomorrow. I've already recorded it. I just need to post it. That's going to teach you how to use the platform, but it just has a much easier to use feel to it. You can now send me direct messages up here. Lots of great things about it. I'm not going to dive into them right now because that's not why we're on this call tonight, but I did want to draw your attention to it. When you log in to Funding Freedom U next, it's automatically going to create your profile, and then you can go in and tweak it yourself when you have a chance. So with that being said, I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and I'm going to unmute and request Dvorah to turn on her video. And while she's doing that, guys, I'm going to just introduce you to her. This Dvorah is somebody who I met last year. We just got it connected. We're both from Austin, and I think it was through an article or something online that got us to meet up for coffee one day. And yeah, she's somehow makes talking about death really fun and interesting, and so just not what you would expect from the traditional quote unquote lawyer. So Dvorah, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's a great honor, Craig. This is really fun, and I'm really very grateful for the opportunity to share information and make it as entertaining and easy as possible for your whole group.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And I did forget to say this too. So anybody who's on the call right now, and I have a screen over here, so whenever I'm turning sideways, that's what I'm looking at. If you guys could type in the chat box, just yes, if you can hear us, both of us. We're going to keep moving on, but I just want to make sure that our microphones are making it through. I assume if you can hear me and I can hear you. Okay, Livia says that she can hear us, so we're good. All right. Well, before we jump into the questions, let's learn a little bit about you. What brought you into working with people on their estates? Estate law, I guess is what it would be called, right?
Right. So I actually started practicing law in Florida. So I have both a Florida license and a Texas license. And then I moved here about 10 years ago, and I started practicing law. And I always felt that estate planning was a way to prevent future suffering for people. So it was sort of like preventative law. Therapeutic law, it's sort of like teaching people how to eat right so you're not dealing with the effects afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started doing court-appointed work, and I saw so much tragedy that could have been avoided. And I just want to help. So, and I had a dear friend who died. I was her last phone call before she died, and she was 84 years old. And the last thing on her mind was to make sure her affairs were in order, which they were. But I thought, wow, what an honor to be part of people's planning and their legacy.
That's really cool. Love that story and just the heart you have for what you do. And so obviously you're in the people business. I mean, you're a lawyer by definition, but just from what I have gotten to know about you, you care more about people than anything beyond that. So, which is great.
Thanks. Yes.
Well, very cool. All right. Well, let's just get to the nitty gritty and let's dive in. Now, before we do, we did want to say that everything today is educational. Should not be considered actual law advice or anything like that. We're just here to teach people about estates and wills and planning, right?
Right. Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah. So this is not legal advice. this is giving you information, education, and I will share at the end something that your guests can download to help them start thinking about this, that I've put together for about 4 years now, which is an estate planning checklist, which will kind of put it all together in a way that makes sense and is easy to read and friendly.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, not legal advice, just legal education, which I think everyone is entitled to, because we're all responsible. And yet some of us don't even know, or don't even know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm. So true. Yeah, that's great. Oh, I love the PDF too. Yeah, I'm sure everyone here would love to have that. So I'll if you're watching the recording right now, if you're not with us live, it should be below the video. I always like doing that for the future. Just look below. It's down there. Click the button. You can download it. But yeah, all right. So let's just talk about estate planning. What is estate planning? Just period.
Okay.
What is it?
I've summed it up into one simple sentence, because it can get very complicated. So I'm going to read you my simple sentence I put together. Estate planning enables you to make vital personal decisions about the management and distribution of your assets, as well as your health and personal care. So it's not just the will, because the will only works if you die, but it's also incapacity documents, which we'll talk about. So it's an entire set of documents that cover different scenarios, right? So if you become incapacitated and you said in your will who you want to take care of your kids, it's no good because you're not dead. So the will is not going to work because it hasn't been probated. So that's why we need incapacity documents. So that's a really important thing to say. Everyone always says, I just want the will. But in fact, Texas has already written your will, right? It's in the statute. So that's why when you die intestate, which is just a fancy word of saying dying without a will, Texas will make all those decisions for you. So you actually have one, even if you don't think you have one. But it's not probably one you like, very complicated, and it's going to be very expensive.
Okay, interesting. Very, very interesting. I didn't know that. And that also brings up the point too, which I can't remember if we said it, that obviously we're out of Texas, and so a lot of what we're going to talk about is fact for Texas, but states can vary. So just so that may be, it's always good to double check people's state areas. Much like we said at the beginning, this is just educational stuff. So, but I feel like a lot of this stuff we're going to talk about is going to umbrella to everybody, but some of it's going to be state specific. Is that right?
And yeah, exactly right. And when we get to a point, I'm going to make an example of that when we get further into the conversation. But yes, there's some basic concepts. We call it common law, right? And then each state has its own law. So like, for instance, if you get divorced in Florida or you get divorced in California, the state law is going to cover that, right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? It's the same thing with estate planning. So it's covered by state law. So I'd like to say to those of you in Texas that Texas is one of the best states in the country to die in.
Interesting. Usually we're the most complicated state to do anything in.
No, and I'll tell you what, it's interesting. I love this, that Texas, because of the whole Texas attitude about independent, and I'll do it myself because, right, Texas was its own country, right? Got its independence from Spain, from Mexico, and not from England. So that's why our capital is so big. It was the capital of the country. We were a country. Texas was a country, and they don't let you forget that. So they wanted to make things as simple as possible. So we have something called independent administration. So if your documents are set up correctly, it's easy peasy in Texas. So that's what's great about Texas. So things are very complicated, but it goes along with the Texas mentality of, I'll do it myself. Mm-hmm. So that's why they call it independent administration, which means that you don't need court supervision. You get letters testamentary, which we'll talk about, and you're free to go. It can't be easier. It's a cakewalk.
Interesting. And that makes me think of a question. I'm sorry if this was already on our list to ask, but so if I have a will in Texas and I move, do I need to get a new one in a new state?
Okay. That's a great question. People ask me this all the time. So there's certain things that we need to make it legal in Texas, and it might work, right? So if you move from Florida to Texas, it might have enough things. It might not have the word independent administrator. Then you're going to have a hearing to get to be an independent administrator because you didn't use the words. So it could be or couldn't be. We have certain things that has to be signed and it has to be notarized. But I'm going to give you an example. In Texas, because it's Texas again, we have something that we allow called a holographic will, which is just a fancy way of saying a handwritten will. They are valid in Texas under certain circumstances. Guess what? They're not valid in Florida. So if I hand wrote it and I died in Texas and I did it correctly, I could have a will. And I'm going to explain it's not that simple. But if I had that as my handwritten and I moved back to Florida, would I have a will? No, because Florida doesn't recognize handwritten wills.
Okay. Interesting. So yeah, so it sounds like when you have a will, just stay where you are. That's my plan. Okay.
Or, like redo it. Think of it this way, Craig. It's like life insurance or anything else, right? It's not a one-time thing because life changes. Your kids get older, you have friends that come in and out of your life. So it's a snapshot of how you want your assets distributed at this point. But it's something to re-examine every year depending on changes. And for instance, I've changed my will 4 times since I've moved here because my son turned 18. So that was a big deal. So I wanted to make him, he was no longer a minor. Then I got divorced. And then then if you had your husband as the executor, it's void. So you better have an alternate. If you only have your husband, then you don't have an executor anymore. So there were a few different things, and I wanted to move things around, and the law changed, and I wanted to update my will. We have things called digital assets, right? Because so many people have their lives online, like we're doing right now. But who can get into your email account? Who can get into your Facebook account? Who can get into your Instagram account? Now we have words, we have language, statutory language that allows you to do that.
Interesting. Okay. I did not know that. Yeah, and you're right, because we wrote a will with my daughter, and then once my son was born, we had to update that. And so that brings me to another question. What should my estate plan include? And not just the will, because we already said that estate planning is not just your will, but when I'm doing estate planning, what all does it need to include?
Okay, I would say at the least 7 documents. This is not even getting fancy. This is just because all of these, which I'll explain, they don't overlap, right? So when this one stops, this one begins. So let's say you have a power of attorney, it's not going to help you in the hospital because it's only about money, right? So I'll go through them. So the first one we talked about is a will with a contingent trust, but it has to be done well and it has to be executed correctly. So, and we can talk about a bunch of case law where someone did a will, but the witnesses left the room or the notary didn't sign where they're supposed to, and it's void, right? So it's not only has to be written correctly, it has to be executed correctly. Okay, so you want all the right words and you want it to reflect exactly what you want. And then I do, as best practice, I always put a contingent trust, which I'm now having to set up because I have a client who was 50, died, and left a minor child, and now there'll be a trust set up, and he's the trustee, and we're going to represent him. So I'll explain that. I'll go deeper if you're curious, but I'll just go through the documents. So what the will, right? First one. Then we're going to say the power of attorney. What that basically is someone can step into your shoes and make financial decisions for you when you don't have capacity. But you can have it done a few different ways. You could have it completely open where they can make any decisions, change beneficiaries, do anything they want, or it could be more narrow. So you hear people get a power of attorney to like sign one document, gives them permission to do that one thing. Usually the power of attorney is wide open. So you have to trust this person. You're giving them your identity. So you can either have it done immediately, which when people are about to become incapacitated, we usually say it's important because once that window closes, you cannot draft these documents.
Right.
Testimony capacity. So you can either be immediately or upon incapacity. So that's the power of attorney. And I'll talk more about that. That's probably the most powerful document there is. You hear about it all the time, and it gets litigated all the time because it's unbelievable power. Imagine you get to be me. You could sell my house, sell my car, change my beneficiaries, right?
Wow. Yeah, and that's true. That's one of the most popular terms because that's one I've heard before. But and I knew I guess on paper what they could do, but you're right, just the heavy-handedness, and even just it's funny when my extended family was doing their wills and their estates and all that, with power of attorney for even whether you're incapacitated or you've passed. I was like, I don't want to be anybody's power of attorney. It's like, don't choose me. That's too much responsibility. So,
Well, you make a good point, but let me back up a little bit. A power of attorney only works while you're alive.
okay.
Why?
So which one is what is the one when you're passed?
Okay, so I'll get to that one in a second. So
Okay.
imagine this way. You're thinking of a medical directive, I think.
I might be. Yeah.
We'll just call the living will. But so imagine this. Imagine shoes. So my son's deaf, so I might use some sign language. And that's why I went to law school. I started law school when he was 4 years old. And that's what started this whole journey was my son Elon, who's now 22. But imagine you have these shoes. Someone can step into your shoes. If you're dead, they can't step into your shoes anymore. So it's only for incapacity, but you can have them do it. Well, you have to be alive on some level, right? It has to be a beating heart, but you could either be, you could have it immediately or upon incapacity. So I could give you that power right now, or I could say you can't have it until I become incapacitated. And it can be wide open or it can be very narrow.
Okay.
But here's the really important part. You can only do a will in all these documents we talk about. You need capacity. And what does that mean? Under the law, it means you have to know who you are, what you own, and you have to be of sound mind. So some people call me and they're like, my mother has dementia and I want to get power of attorney. I say, I can't help you. You have to do a guardianship now. You can't give your power of attorney if you don't have the capacity to give it.
Right.
So that ship has sailed. That's it. You have to do a guardianship now. That's why you also have alternates. Because let's say I only picked you, Craig, as my power of attorney, and you die before me. Now I don't have a power of attorney. There's no alternate to go to.
Which is why it's a fluid document, like we were saying. It's not set in stone. Awesome. So, yeah, you're right. And I think what I was thinking of, too, is an executor, which I guess is probably, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but I guess that's for after you pass, the executor of your estate.
Yes, right. So an executor, by definition, is the person who wraps up your affairs once you're dead.
Yeah, I don't want to be that.
A living person cannot have an executor, but a living person can have a trustee. An executor is the person who carries out your wishes of your will. It means that they collect all the debt, they pay the beneficiaries, and they settle your estate. That's what an executor is.
Okay, so that's the one I don't want to be. So everybody who's watching this, don't play a practical joke and assign me as the executive of your estate.
You don't have to accept it.
Okay, I deny it right now.
you can waive the right. No one can make you serve.
Okay, great. Good to know. All right, well, we went on a tangent there. So what were the must-haves? There was 7. I think we said 2 of them already,
okay,
right?
So we have the will with the contingent trust. We have the power of attorney, which we talked about. That one could go on forever. That's an entire class. Then we have the medical power of attorney, which is very different because the law splits it into person and estate, body and money. Okay, so it's split. All right. So the medical power of attorney is people can make medical decisions for you if you lose capacity. The difference with them, so it has nothing to do with money, but it's like operate, not operate. But they can't overrule you. Like, let's say you go and someone has my medical power of attorney. They're like, I want you to operate on Dvorah. Well, she already she already has her medical power of attorney, gave it to me, and I'm going to tell her what she needs. That can't happen. They can't override you. That one only kicks in if you can't make decisions.
Okay.
All right. Or you don't have capacity. So you might think you have capacity, but they're like, she's not in her right mind, which gets complicated. So it spells it out. And when I do these documents, it gives you the statute and makes sure you understand exactly what you're doing. They're very powerful documents for better or for worse.
Okay, awesome.
So we have them. So we've done 3 so far. The next one is, we call it a medical directive or directive to physician. Some people in parts of the country call it a living will. And that's when you want, I call it, when you decide when you want to die. I call it pull the plug, don't pull the plug. If you don't have this, then it leaves it to the family of deciding what to do because you didn't leave your wishes anywhere. And which means that if there's fight, do you remember the case in Florida, Terry Schiavo? Remember that? So anyway, there was this case. Okay, So there was this case, and I was in law school, and it went on forever, and millions and millions of dollars, and the governor got involved, which was Jeb Bush at the time. And this young woman died. She became incapacitated, very, very young. I think she was like 23 or 24, and she went on life support. And the husband wanted to pull her off life support, but she hadn't left the directive, and her parents wanted her to stay on. So it became a legal battle with millions and millions of dollars.
Oh, wow.
And tragic. So she was like left on life support for like 20 years because the parents wouldn't let go. So that's the Terri Schiavo, and you can look it up. It's very, very sad. It's in Florida, and it was happening while I was in law school. So all along, I kept on saying, how can I best use my law degree? Where can I do the best for people? And I started off by doing disability law, and I really enjoy that. But I felt like I could do for everyone. So a lot of my clients are deaf. Because I can communicate in American Sign Language.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay, so we got the medical directive. The next one that's really important is guardianship in case of death or later incapacity for your children. Okay, this one is really important because if, let's say, you put that one in your will, but you became incapacitated and you didn't die, it's not binding, right? Because the will is not working because it didn't go through probate because you didn't die. So because you become incapacitated. The great thing about this document is you can set up who you want to be the guardians for your children, their body, who takes care of them, who takes care of their estate, their money. They can be the same or different people. And here's the best part, ready? You can disqualify people.
Okay.
So let's say you have a sister, brother, cousin, someone who you'd never want access to your children. You can disqualify them, and by law, they may not serve. You can't guarantee the people you picked will serve. You hope they will, right? But you're never forced into it. You can't be forced to serve. But you can bet the people you disqualify, it's in the statute, may not serve.
Good. I got a long list of people I don't want taking my kids. So.
And you laugh about it, but I've done estates. I've been doing this for 4 years now, and I've done estates where it's like 2 or 3 pages of people, and then we say this is not, the end of the people is anyone from this line. So they wanted to protect themselves and their family, and that's what you're doing. It's really a love letter to your family and yourself for peace of mind, and it is so important. Okay, so we got that one. Then we have the one for yourself. Let's say you become incapacitated. Who's going to take over? What we have is the power of attorney and the medical power of attorney, and we call those soft guardianships. But let's say for some reason all those people died or they don't work. What are we going to do now? You want to pick who you want for your person and for your estate and who you want to disqualify. So that's another one. So it's guardian for yourself in case of later incapacity, obviously not death. Death, no one's going to take that, right? Okay, then one of my all-time favorites, and you would not believe how often this one is litigated, is agent in charge of remains. What that means is, let's say, so I'm Jewish, and in my tradition, we don't usually cremate people, but I've decided I want to be cremated. So what did I do? I bought a cremation package, which I suggest everybody does. And I also, a very dear friend, put him in charge of my remains and told him exactly what I want. So there can be no fighting. There can be no arguing because I made a legal document and my wishes have to be followed. Now I have, and the court will get behind it. And if it's done well, it's waterproof, right? So obviously you want it done well, because so many times if it's not done well or not done correctly and someone fights it, that's what they call about will contests. Someone's arguing, duress. There are things that can undo a will. Duress, undue influence. The person wasn't in their right mind, didn't have capacity. You hear stories like this all the time, like somebody was taking care of them at the end and they left everything to them. They're saying, yeah, but my mother wasn't in her right mind. So they'll fight that. So, okay. And then the last one, which I think is really important, is having a HIPAA release form. And because I've done a lot of hospital visits, I've done before a birth, after a birth, between contractions. I've done right before someone died. I've done someone who had locked-in syndrome, Guillain-Barré, something like that. And this allows certain people to call in and get information about you, right? Because like I've been in the hospital room where an aunt will call and they'll say, how's he doing? to the nurse, and the nurse will say, I can't share that information with you. But if you have it as a HIPAA release form, you can have the people who can have information about you. Your medical power of attorney always will, but there could be other people you don't want to be your medical power of attorney, but you want to be able to call in your mother, your father, your sister, your brother. You want them to have access to your medical records so they can call in and find out what happened. Otherwise, the hospital won't talk to you.
Okay, great. So there's a lot more to it than just a will, which I think is basically what most people, even myself, it was just a will. That's what you need to have, and there's so many more important components which I wouldn't even be able to begin to hash through on my own. But we talked about an executor, so that's going to be for after you're deceased. But let's talk about who should be your executor. Who should I appoint to be the executor of my estate?
Okay, and this is great, and this will be, I put this in that document which your listeners can download, and I kind of spell out what kind of person you want. It's someone who is capable, trustworthy, and good with people and money, because it's a high conflict position, right? Usually you hire a lawyer to help you through the probate process, but you have to gather a lot of information. And so it's such a blessing if all your information is together, right? All your documents are together, right? Because if not, they have to find stuff all over the place, and it makes it messy. So you really want to have somebody you absolutely trust. Most people put their spouse, some people, but the problem is with that is that person is going to be mourning.
Mm-hmm.
And when you die, you have to start the probate process. So you can hire a professional, you can ask someone else, someone that you completely trust that will be able to deal with it and your death. Because here's the thing, you want them to be able to mourn you and not be worried about lawyer fees and how they're going to pay the rent and the mortgage and where the money is. And I've heard so many times people say the death was the least tragic part of it. It was dealing with all the chaos and the expense and the heartache. And I want to bring that to a level. I can't prevent death. None of us can. It's inevitable. But what we can do is prevent the suffering that could go along with it, right? Like pain is, there's a saying, pain is universal, but suffering is optional.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. Yeah, and that's the worst possible time. And I even thinking of myself who would be a good executor. It's you're right. It's got to be somebody who can keep a level head during those moments, because there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot that they're in charge of, and it happens. It's not like it's take a couple months and then we'll get this moving. It's pretty quick, because there's things in play that need a quick response, like their home and things like that need. It's a very interesting point. All right, let's talk about trusts. What's a trust? I've heard that term. What is a trust?
Okay, so what a trust is if you think of it like this, it's like a bowl, okay? And the trust will own something, but in order for things to get into that trust, it has to be titled in the name of the trust. So we're really lucky because, like in California, it's kind of a no-brainer to set up a trust with your estate documents. But in Texas, we have independent administration, which means it moves really quickly, and you're not paying a part of your estate to an attorney. So the reason you want, and I'm going to give you the definition so people will understand, because I want to make sure they understand what it is. So I'm going to explain this. A trust is an entity. It just means a trust is an instrument, a legal instrument, okay, in which an individual, the trustee, holds legal title to property for the benefit and use of another, the beneficiary. So what they're basically doing is they're splitting title. Somebody's in charge and someone gets the benefit. Mm-hmm. Okay, so like for instance, let's say I set up a trust for, I had $10 million, and I set up a trust and I pick you as my trustee. So you have legal title, right? You're the trustee, you're responsible. You have fiduciary duties, you have financial and legal duties, but you don't own the money. Mm-hmm. My children do, but I'm asking you to follow it. So that's what it'd be. You would be the trustee, and my children, in this example, would be the beneficiaries. But why people love trusts, we call it pulling ropes from the grave, because you can control how the money it goes, and it doesn't have to be probated, which again in Texas is not a big deal because we have independent administration. It's quick. But it's what's good about a trust is it's a private document. Wills are always public documents. You can look up anyone's will online, right? The original, let's talk about that, the original will. Okay, the original gets with the court and stays with the court. That's the original. Okay, so that's really important. But a trust, you can keep on making rules. I could say, I give my money to my daughter when she turns 18, only if she goes to college. Guess what? I'm dead, but she doesn't go to college. She doesn't get the money. I can do a contingency. If she doesn't go to college, I want to give it to my dog. Right? So you can put almost anything in a will that isn't illegal or immoral. For example, you can't put in there, my children may not get married. Mm-hmm. The court would void it. It's not right. Or if my children move out of the country or something, it wouldn't really make sense. And, a court might not enforce that. But they could enforce something like, if my children smoke, mm-hmm. right? Or if they do drugs, I can condition the giving of the money in a trust. But here's the problem with the trust. Most people set up a trust and they don't fund it. So it's empty. But we'll talk about what a contingent trust is, which is different. So why you definitely need a trust, if you have, and then I'm talking about Texas now. Okay, mm-hmm. This is general, but I'm going to talk about directly Texas law. So if you have property in another state, you want that property titled as in the name of the trust. Why? Because you'd have to open probate in 2 states. How are you going to move the property? All probate is, if you can think of it this way, is moving assets from A to B when the person is dead. That's all it is. Nothing more complicated. So there are, let me get back. So you want, if they have property outside the state, if you have a special needs child, right, who can't have a certain amount of money because they want to stay on benefits, if you're at the very end of your life and all your assets are named in the trust, mm-hmm. Or you want absolute privacy. You want it to be absolutely private. So that's really important to remember. But usually you don't need it, and people forget to fund their trust. So it's empty. It's a bowl. They're not putting things in it, right? They're not changing title, mm-hmm. right? It has to be in the title of, and that's what a trust is.
Okay, interesting. Everything you're saying is just reaffirming that hiring a professional is what you should do, because I'm like, navigating that. Okay, how do I navigate that? All right.
Well, it's exactly that. It's like saying, if I had a drill, I don't have to go to the dentist. But I'm not paying for the drill. It's not paying for the form. You're paying for all that education, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. When I was in law school, I wrote my own will on a legal Zoom. Went to legal Zoom, and I did a will in law school. After law school, when I looked at that will, it would have been void because I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
But at the time, I felt, I've saved money. But it's like buying an expensive car and putting on really cheap tires. Like, if you're doing it for peace of mind, do it right. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of when I was a kid. My father set up this play structure in the back. And then he told my mom, and look, it has all these leftover pieces. And then my kids were like, my mom said, kids, off, right? No, like, you're not going to, say, I want to do it cheap and I want to do it fast, so I'm not going to hire an architect. I know somebody who is really good with Lincoln Logs, and that's good enough for me. And I say, have at it. If that's where your priority is, do it. People say, how much does it cost? And here's the question I like to ask them. How much does it cost to not do it right? What's that worth? What's your peace of mind worth? Mm-hmm. I mean, to know that your lasting memory is what a mess he left us. You want your kids to say, Dad was great. He was loving, but what a mess at the end. That's the story. That's your legacy. Uh-huh. You're writing your last chapter. So why not have it written correctly and done right? That's how I feel. I didn't know how to do it, and I was a lawyer, and I know and a lot of my clients are lawyers, because you really have to know what you're doing, and they just don't want to bother with knowing it. It's more than just a form, right? And I've had to litigate where a lawyer did a will, but it was no good because it's just something they did, right?
Right.
It's not there. Like if my kid goes to jail, I don't want a state attorney to get them out of jail. Who do I want? A criminal defense attorney, right? Because they know what they're doing. That's what they studied. There's so many nuances. I want to know they know their stuff, and that's we call it their widget, their expertise.
Yeah.
I do the same thing for a doctor or a dentist. Like when I was in law school, I needed my teeth fixed, and I wanted this one dentist because I loved her. I thought she was just the best, but she was really expensive. But I didn't try to bargain down or go to a clinic. It was my teeth. So I took a loan out, a dental loan, because that was a priority for me. I wanted to keep my teeth. I thought it would help being a lawyer who had teeth. I thought I probably wouldn't get many clients if I'd lost my teeth. And it's because my teeth were cracking because of the crown. So I had crowns put in. So that's what I did. And so that's sort of my philosophy. Find out what's important to you and build your life around that. If peace of mind and taking care of your family are as important to you, then make this happen. Lots of good lawyers out there. You can do it yourself, but you take a chance of no security. You can operate on yourself. You could do a YouTube and learn how to do laser surgery. You could do that, but do you want to?
Nope. Pass. Yeah, no, thank you. All right, so let's say somebody has a will already and they need to amend it. What do we do? How do we change our will, or especially if somebody did go on LegalZoom and now they're thinking, okay, I want to go amend it with an estate lawyer, somebody who can really make sure it's done right. What's that process look like? What do you do if you want to amend your will?
Okay, short answer, you get a new will, okay? Long law school answer is there's something called a codicil, which is a fancy word, which means an amendment to your will, which has to be notarized and go through the same procedure as a will, which means it has to have certain language in it, it has to be notarized, and it has to be witnessed. Right?
So you're just better off starting from scratch, basically, just
because you have different ideas. might have, and the law keeps on changing, right? You want to digital assets, you want to have this. Oh, I also want to do a contingent special needs trust. I want to do this. Oh, that's why part of the reason I keep on redoing my will, not just because of my life changing, is because the law keeps on changing. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure I have the high tech with the latest language in it, which was the digital assets, which I was putting in before they started using these, as a boilerplate, but I knew I'd need special language for that. Mm-hmm. So it's really why I got to keep up with the law. It keeps on changing. You have lots of different freedoms, and the power of attorneys changed just this year. The wording changed. It gives you more or less power. So it's something you want to look at all the time. Just like you want to look at your life insurance, right? When my kids were little, I had a lot of life insurance because I had 2 little kids. Now I have an adult and a 13-year-old. So I changed, right? Mm-hmm. But I didn't, I went to a professional, and I think there are certain things. I'll give you another example. One time, I cut my son's bangs, and my mother said, hire a professional. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's just for your hair, okay? Just because I had scissors did not make me a hairdresser. I would say most people watching this have a pair of scissors at home. Most people go to a hairdresser, right? So that's a level of not high. Hair grows back. It's no big deal, right?
Right.
But you want to make a document that is your last will and testament from the internet, from LegalZoom, when someone went to school and studied it, so that's what I think. And you have an ongoing relationship, and then you can call the person and say, look, I'm really concerned. This has just happened. And you have a relationship with that attorney. So I take it as a very sacred relationship that they're taking me into their trust and allowing me. It's a privilege, really a privilege to be able to do this kind of work. I feel so grateful.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so true. 100%. Well, So on that point too, with wills, who needs them? Does everybody need to have one? Because I'm a believer with life insurance. Not every single person needs it. I look at life insurance as a income replacement. So if I was living by myself with no kids and no spouse, and if I were to pass financially, everyone would be okay. Then I probably wouldn't need life insurance. I could still choose to get it, but I wouldn't need it. But wills, does everybody need a will? Short
Yes,
answer, yes or
because
no?
everyone's gonna die. I mean, if this is news to people, I hate to break it to you, but you will die. It's a question of how you're going to die and what's going to happen with your stuff and what kind of mess you're going to leave behind. That never changes. I understand with the life insurance. And until I had kids, I had no life insurance. Then I had a lot. Now I have less. And then at some point I'm going to have none. That's fine. I outgrew it. You don't outgrow your mortality. It's called death, and that's why you need a will. So everyone needs it. It's very complicated to die without a will. In Texas, it's very simple. Okay, let me put it this way. It simplifies the process of wrapping up your estate because you have stuff all over the place. And how are they going to move all that title? It's going to cost. And guess who's going to pay for it when you don't have a will? You're going to have to do something called an heirship hearing to find out who your heirs are. Because what you're going to do is depend on Texas that wrote your will. But you got to prove up your heirs. And they might be the people that you like. Mm-hmm. And that's going to cost probably as much as just doing an estate plan to begin with, to just decide who your heirs are. So for instance, I do court-appointed work as an attorney ad litem. So I'm hired, they have to hire an attorney ad litem to represent, we call them unknown heirs. So let's say, Craig, you die without a will. You have to go to court and we have to decide who your heirs are. And then we have to get an attorney ad litem to represent someone. Maybe you had kids when you were in college. They're your heirs according to the law, and we better find them. Mm-hmm. So that's an heirship hearing. So that is the first process. And then you have to deal with, you're stuck with the Texas statute. And then next, it's not in people you want. And you just spent all the money, and where the money came from, your estate. It came out of your pocket anyway. It comes out of your pocket alive or dead. You think of yourself as the estate is you dead. Who's going to clean up you dead? I know that sounds silly, but do you understand what it makes? And right. Then everyone is going to die. So I make a very extreme example, but I think there's no way to make people understand how important this is without getting a bit graphic. But here it is. Let's say someone wants to kill themselves. They could go and take pills, simple, right? Or they could go and blow their brains out in their kid's bedroom, right? They're killing themselves both ways. But one is an absolute mess to clean up. And I know that's an extreme example, but I have seen so much suffering. And I've gotten involved in a few litigations, and it is just unbelievably heartbreaking. And I keep on thinking, why didn't they just leave a will? Mm-hmm. And sometimes they left a will, but they didn't leave it right. They didn't do it correctly. I'm working with one, the guy has a will, but it was done not so well. So we still have to deal with that. So I just feel like, just do it right. Just do it right. And, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's the last chapter of your life. People think, I don't care because I won't be here, but someone will.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Someone will, right?
Yep, and it's the people you care about. So, yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point. And even just what I think is a lot of people don't like to think about their death, or especially superstitious people who think, well, the second I submit that form, I'm going to go. But the truth is, it's important. Because I was always the guy who was like, I don't want to think about that. It's depressing to think about what we're going to do for my kids if we both pass. You to have to think about that. It's not a fun process to imagine life for your children growing up without you. But at the same time, what's worse, me going and having no idea where they end up, who they end up with, and so it's almost like you got to trudge through the mud to make sure that the mess is cleaned up. And even with people dealing with our estates and having to make those decisions, putting that burden on people we care about to have to decide where they're, what's going to happen with all that stuff. It's me going through that this time now of not having fun. It's not fun, but I'm saving heartache and anguish for a lot of people. When that will needs to be utilized.
And that's exactly what I say, Craig. You make some really good points. I call it a love letter to your family. If we renamed wills love letters to your family, everyone would get one. That's how life insurance works. If you call it death insurance, because that's really what it is. It's the insurance your family gets when you die. It's not really life insurance, right?
Right.
Because a will you write when you're alive, and it works when you're dead. So if we called wills, it's called last will and testament. But if we called it love letter, then people will be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I mean, think about car insurance. You have to have car insurance. And it's illegal to drive without car insurance. Why? Because you're going to leave a mess. Who's going to pay for it? The law makes you have insurance for yourself, and it doesn't insist that you get uninsured motorists or underinsured. You're never insuring yourself, but you have to ensure you don't leave a mess for other people. So it's the same idea. I mean, maybe I've heard it said before, this will never happen, but like everyone has to have a will by law. But the whole point is it's free will. That irony of the will. A will is something you choose because you're a grown up and you're doing the right thing. That's what it is. You're facing your mortality, which is okay. We live, we die. Right? This is our turn on earth right now. It's a really short turn, but make the most out of it. It's okay. It will be someone else's turn at some point. Death is not a failure. It's part of the whole process of life. It's okay that it happens. What we can do, we can't stop it. I can't give you immortality, but what I can do is make sure your mortality is not so painful on those you love.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I think you're right. It's one of those things you have to get around doing. And luckily, everyone who's watching this in Funding Freedom U is used to doing that, because we're having to trudge through debt and face the ever wonderful, so much fun budget. So we're used to doing things, but that aren't necessarily the most fun for the greater good and the bigger reward for our families. And so anyway, all right, let's talk about wills.
I just want to say that a will is when you hire an attorney, they do the heavy lifting. It's probably more painful to do a budget than it is to do a will. And the way when your guests download that information, the lawyer will do the heavy lifting. You don't. The hard part for the person is realizing they have to have people they trust. And that's usually the barrier, because they go, oh my God, I have no one I can trust. And they don't want to do it. So I think that's happened quite a bit. I've had clients, they realize there's no one they trust. And then they have to take a hard look at their life. It's a really come to Jesus or come to Moses moment where you have to really face. And that's what a grown-up does. That's an evolved being, right? So that's really important. And I do all the heavy lifting because I consider myself an attorney and counselor at law. I'll counsel you. Let's talk about, and I'll help you pick. Tell me about this person. Why do you want this person? Oh, you know what? May I suggest you do it this way? May I suggest you do it that way? Let me tell you the problems I've seen when you do co-agents. They're going to fight. The whole point is to have one steering wheel in a car, not two. So I'll walk you through the process. It's not like I'm sending them home with homework. Just tell me what you want and I'll set you straight. And that's what a good, estate attorney, just like a doctor. Like, I want the doctor to describe basically the operation, but I don't want to go and want it detail by detail. Okay. I don't want the video, and I don't want to know it step by step, and I don't want to go to medical school. I want to know they can do it. And once I'm satisfied, that should be good enough. And it's the same thing with my clients. Almost every single one of them say, and you could see on the, on my website, dvorlaw.com, it was so easy. It was so easy. I'm like, yes, yes, I'm here to tell you the great big secret. It's not difficult, and it's not that expensive. And it's quick. I've done them in 24 hours when people were on their deathbed.
Wow.
And people should not make decisions in that kind of crisis. I get calls every single day. And sometimes it's too late. I can't help them. They're beyond, they don't have the capacity, so they can't make a will anymore. It's too late. Or they're making decisions under all this stress. Why not sit down and have a family meeting? Talk to your friends, talk to your family, ask them what they want. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to respect someone and to understand their wishes and carry it out. It's the greatest honor to carry out the wishes of a past loved one, right? Yeah. And you get to say anything you want. This is how I want to wrap it up. This is how I want to thank the people. So, that's really, really, really important. And, we didn't talk about this, is more technical, but there's probate assets and non-probate assets, which I think is really important. People don't understand. A will is only going to move things, property, this pen, this, but it's not going to, unless you leave it to your estate. And I'm not going to go into that right now, but life insurance is a third-party contract. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I leave my children as the beneficiary in my life for my life insurance, but in my will I say any life insurance proceeds should go to Craig. Who gets it? My kids, because they're the beneficiaries. I can't pass it. Right? It's a third. Same thing. Anything with beneficiaries can't be passed through a will. So what does that mean? Anything that you have, like your retirement accounts, anything that has a beneficiary cannot be passed through a will. So those are non-probate assets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And so there's so many simple ways we can retitle things. We have something in Texas called the transfer deed on death. You can leave your home with a beneficiary to take it out of the probate process. So like, how you die and I'll leave you as the, beneficiary of my IRA account. I can leave you as the beneficiary of my home. It's called a transfer deed on death. It has to be recorded. You don't need a lawyer to do it. But again, you want to make sure it's done right. Mm-hmm. And I've already used it. We also have something called Ladybird trusts, which splits the house. So they have a life estate and then they have the person who can will own it when the person dies. They don't want to show their assets. So there's many tools in the law. So that's why I have to find out, what do you want? Right? So it's because it's not one size fit all. I need to know, is this a first marriage, a second marriage? It is an absolute nightmare in Texas. This is the worst case scenario. You die, you don't leave a will. It's your second or third marriage. You have kids from all the different marriages, but not from that one marriage. And now you're going to have to split all the properties in percentages. It gets so complicated that the probate court makes us make charts because we're a community property state. But then you also have your personal property. And then you also have personal real property. So there are so many categories of property. It gets unbelievably complicated. And you have to know math.
Oh boy, math. I like math.
Right.
Awesome.
So that's why it's really important for everyone should have it. It's a no-brainer. And the thing is, people say, I'm afraid that if I get life insurance, if I write a will, I'll die. But nobody says, I'm afraid I'm going to get car insurance and get into a car accident.
Right.
It's the same. It's just a weird way to think about it. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's important.
Right. I just bought like a cremation package because I've seen so many sad things. And I thought, I'm not afraid I'm going to die now. In fact, I have more security. I feel like I'm not afraid to cross the street because I have I have children to raise, people that are depending on me. Mm-hmm. But I feel so much more at ease and peace of mind. So in my philosophy, it actually buys you time. I can't prove it. I can only talk from my personal experience, but I know that I have my stack of documents, which I have my life insurance, I have my, my funeral information. I have all my documents set out and ready to go. So everything is there, because if not, people are going to go through your stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to say, no, I think he left a will. We're going to go through all his papers. Really? Really? You want to do that? Do you know how vulnerable? If everyone's about control, I want control, right? And then they leave that last part open, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's like, you get all the great things you want, and then you leave the gate open. well then, all those horses you've just collected are going to wander. And that's what happens without leaving a will. It's
Yeah.
so silly, right? It's so silly not to do it. And I try to make the process as fun, because I don't take myself seriously, but I take my work very seriously. And there's a big difference. I think a lot of people get them confused. So it doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be serious. You don't need a beard. You don't have to be, but it's a grown-up thing, right? And I have a lot of respect for people when they make the call. The first thing I say to people is, thank you for making this call. Even if they hire me or not, I'm really glad they're looking at this.
Yeah, they're thinking about it, taking that first action step. Yeah, I agree. 100%. Awesome. Okay, so tell us how we can get in touch with you. And I forgot to tell people to ask questions in the chat box. So if you do have a question, we have just like 4 minutes left. You can go ahead and type those in. Otherwise, give us your contact info, and if you're open to it, people can drop you a line.
Sure.
Or you guys can ask it and send them to me, and I can forward them on to Dvorah. But how can we get a hold of you? How can we reach you?
Okay, so my website is Dvorah Law, which is DVORAHLAW.com. That's my website. Okay.
I'll put that in the chat box for everybody.
Okay, so you'll see they will say download your free intake, your checklist, and that automatically goes free. And I've worked on that for 4 years. It's my own product, right? So, but that's free to everyone. Everyone should know that it's not that complicated. They say, if Einstein said, if you can't explain it to your grandmother, you don't really understand it. It's complex, but it's not difficult to understand, but you do have to know what you're doing. So that's really, really important. And then if they're interested, we can make it happen anywhere in Texas. I have my license in Florida, but I'm not, it's too complicated right now. I might do that later on. But right now I'm just practicing in Texas. And I just want to say, this is how we met Craig. Okay, one night I went online and I was looking at Huffington Post, and I was wondering if there are any really good articles that I might add to my blog. And there was an article, and you were in it, about financial planning and how important it was. And then it said from Austin, Texas. And I was like, oh my God. And then from that Huffington Post article, I called you and you said you'd meet with me. So that's how I met you. Yeah. What you're doing, because I had done my research. So if there are people who are looking for a certain type of attorney, make sure you like the person, just like your doctor. You want to make sure it becomes a very intimate relationship, right? It's confidential, obviously, between me and the client. I can never share that information. It's absolutely confidential. But make sure it's the person you want to work with, you feel comfortable with them, and then just get it done. I know Nike has said this, but just do it. No one likes it. You don't wait till you want to do a will. I didn't want to take the bar here in Texas. I had already taken it in Florida. So my friend said to me, are you waiting to want to take the bar? Because if you're waiting to want to take it, it'll never happen. So don't wait till you want to do it. Just do it because that's what grown-ups do. And you want to take care of your family. And it's not expensive. It's not difficult. It's not complicated. There's a lot of good people out there. And it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned, really.
Perfect. Absolutely. All right. Well, I'll add, again, if you're watching the recording right now, I'll put the link below. People can get in touch with you. If you're in Texas, I highly recommend reaching out to Dvorah. If you're outside of Texas, well, look,
if you're outside of Texas and you're like, oh my gosh, you can send me an email, because I'm on lots of listservs and I might be able to find you someone, or they could do like a Google search, or they can go on Yelp. I mean, I'll help anyone any way I can. That's why I went into this business.
That's what I was going to ask, is if you had a connection. So that's everybody drop Dvorah a line if you need an estate planner. And like I said, if you're in Texas, I highly recommend using her. She's just
this was so much fun. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was a ball. And I hope people feel more comfortable and they can have this discussion and they can use the information. And I really appreciate the work you do. So Craig, thank you.
Thank you. And likewise, I mean, I do want to say this because I told you up front that Funding Freedom U is just it's it's a US, there's people all over the country in this platform, and so you came into this knowing that a majority of the people couldn't hire you, and so the fact that you gave your time to educate just shows your passion and your heart and the type of person you are. So thank you for being here. We'll Everyone grab that PDF, and then I'll get your info to add under the video. And yeah, enjoy your night, and thanks again for doing this with me.
Oh, this is a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, bye, Dvorah.